You know what's funny about lies? The good ones don't feel like lies while you're telling them. They feel like relief. This is a story about a man who told one lie on one golf course in front of the people who trusted him the most. It took him about 4 seconds to tell it. It took him almost 2 months to admit it. And by the time he did, it wasn't really about the golf ball anymore. Let's get into it. Part 1. The Club. If you've never spent time around a private country club, here's what you need to understand before any of this makes sense. It's not really about the golf. I mean, it is. Obviously, it's about the golf, but the golf is the excuse. The real thing happening at a place like WingHaven Country Club out in O'Fallon, Missouri, is a decades-long social contract between grown men who've built their entire identities around being good at something in front of each other. Doctors, contractors, guys who run their own companies, guys who used to play college sports and never quite let that part of themselves go. They show up on Saturday mornings in matching polos, they talk trash on the first tee, and underneath all of it, underneath the fist bumps and the "nice shot, man," there's this quiet, unspoken thing running through the whole club. You don't cheat. Not because there's a rule book that says so, though there is. You don't cheat because the entire point of the game, the actual point, the reason grown men still care this much about hitting a small white ball into a hole, is that golf is one of the only sports on earth where you're basically on the honor system the whole time. Nobody's watching you in the woods when your ball goes off the fairway. Nobody's checking your scorecard line by line. The whole thing runs on trust. It always has. WingHaven isn't some random Muni course either. It was designed by Jack Nicklaus. It's the kind of place where a membership means something, where getting invited to play in the member tournament isn't just a Saturday activity, it's a small badge of belonging. And once a year, that tournament comes with a little extra flavor, a side pot. Every player throws some money in at the start of the event, and if anybody manages to card a hole-in-one on one of the par threes over the course of the tournament, they walk away with the whole thing. It's not life-changing money, let's be honest about that up front. This isn't some 6-figure jackpot. But it was never really about the money. It was about being the guy who did it. The guy everybody's still talking about at the 19th hole 3 years later. And that's the thing that's going to matter later. Keep that in your back pocket. Part 2. The Man. More focused, like you're introducing a character in a novel. Zach Holland wasn't some weekend hacker who got lucky and got greedy. That's important. Because if this were a story about a guy who never had any talent trying to fake his way into a moment of glory, it would almost be understandable. Sad, but understandable. That's not what happened here. Holland was a real golfer, a former college player. The kind of guy who plays off a 2 handicap, which, if you don't know golf, means he's genuinely, legitimately good. Better than almost anyone he was playing against that day. Better than most people who will ever pick up a club in their lives. He didn't need to fake anything. That's what makes this whole thing sting a little more than your average sports scandal. He had the skill. He had the respect. He had, by every account anyone's given since, a good relationship with the guys he played with. Guys who, by the way, weren't strangers. These were people he'd been golfing with for years. People who knew his swing. People who probably could have picked his ball flight out of a lineup. Friends. That's the word that keeps coming up. Friends. And I think that's worth sitting with for a second. Because we tend to imagine betrayal as this dramatic, cinematic thing. Somebody in the shadows, somebody with an agenda, somebody you never really trusted in the first place. But most betrayal doesn't look like that. Most of it happens in broad daylight on a Tuesday from somebody who's been standing next to you for years. That's what happened at WingHaven. Part 3. The Setups. So here's how the day actually played out, based on what's been reported and what Holland himself later described. The tournament had the usual format. Groups moving through the course together, everybody chatting, needling each other about bad shots, that whole rhythm you get in a member event, where the golf matters, but the hanging out matters just as much. At some point, the group made their way to one of the course's par 3 holes. This is the kind of hole where the whole shot happens in front of you. Tee to green, one swing. No fairway in between to hide behind, which, on paper, should make it one of the hardest holes to cheat on. Except, there's often a stretch, depending on the layout, depending on where the group is standing, depending on who's watching who, where not everybody has a clean, uninterrupted sight line on exactly where a ball lands. People are getting their clubs out, people are chatting, people are looking at their own lie, not somebody else's. And in that small gap, that little sliver of a moment where nobody's fully watching, is exactly where this story lives. According to the account that later circulated, Holland hit his tee shot, and somewhere in the process, whether it was during that shot or in the moments right after, walking up toward the green, his ball ended up in the hole. Not because it flew there, because he put it there. Part 4. The moment. This is the emotion centered. You're standing on a green, on a golf course you've played 100 times, with guys you've known for years. And somebody in your group, somebody you like, somebody you trust, walks up and there's a golf ball sitting in the cup that has no business being there. What do you feel in that moment? You feel joy. Real, uncomplicated joy. Somebody in your group just did something rare, something that maybe none of you will ever do in your entire golfing lives, and your first instinct, your only instinct, is to celebrate with him. That's what happened. There was excitement, there was praise, guys clapping him on the back, probably somebody already pulling out a phone to text the rest of the club. In the video that later surfaced and made its way around golf social media, there's a moment where Holland is heard describing the shot to his group. Something along the lines of thinning the shot, but pointing to a divot mark near the green as proof it had actually gotten close enough to roll in. "I thinned it, but there's a divot on the green," is close to what he told them. And they believed him. Of course they believed him. Why wouldn't they? Nobody in that group was thinking about betrayal in that moment. They were thinking about celebration, about buying him a drink later, about how they got to witness something special. They didn't know they were the ones being played. Part 5. The weeks after. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough in stories like this. The moment of the lie is never the hardest part. The hardest part is everything that comes after. All those weeks where you have to keep carrying it. Holland took the pot. The club, from everything that's been reported, treated the moment exactly the way you'd expect, as a genuine highlight, something to be proud of, a story that gets told and retold at the clubhouse bar. And somewhere in all of that, the handshakes, the congratulations, the retelling, he had to keep nodding along, keep accepting the praise, keep looking his friends in the eye. I don't know what that does to a person. I don't think most of us do, honestly, because most of us have never had to sit inside a lie that big in front of people who actually mattered to us for that long. But eventually, and this is the part of the story that, if you're being honest, nobody saw coming, he didn't wait to get caught. He told them himself. Part 6. The confession. A few weeks after the tournament, Holland did an interview with a local sports radio station in St. Louis, the morning after show on 101 ESPN. This wasn't some ambush interview. This wasn't a reporter catching him off guard with hard evidence. As far as anyone's been able to tell, nobody was closing in on him. Nobody had proof. Nobody was asking pointed questions about a golf ball and a suspicious divot mark. He just told them. The host, from what's been described, asked him something simple. How's it going? How are you doing? The kind of question you ask anybody at the start of an interview. It's kind of a tough question to answer because it's all self-inflicted, Holland said. He mentioned he was on a family vacation at the time, and then he added something that, honestly, might be the most human line in this entire story. Not that I can call it that right now. And then, on live radio, in front of an audience that had no idea what was coming, he laid it all out. What he did, how he did it, why he did it. He said something about consequences, about how some of them are fair and some of them aren't. He didn't sound like a guy trying to spin a story. From every account, he sounded like a guy who was tired of carrying something. Part 7. The Fallout. Here's the thing about a story like this in 2026. It doesn't stay local. It can't. Within WingHaven itself, word moved fast. From the guys who'd actually been standing on that green with him, out to the rest of the membership, the way anything does in a club that size. People who'd celebrated with him were now hearing, secondhand, that the moment they'd been proud to witness had never actually happened. Then it hit social media. A detailed account of the whole thing started circulating on TikTok, described by one user as one of the craziest golf stories they'd ever heard. Golf accounts on Twitter picked it up, then Yahoo Sports. Then outlets all the way over in the UK started drawing comparisons. There'd been another amateur cheating scandal that summer, a cricket player nicknamed Clicky Ponting out of Yorkshire, and suddenly Holland's name was getting mentioned in the same breath. A guy who, a few weeks earlier, had been getting his back patted on a golf course in Missouri was now a headline. Not a local one, not a small one. A story that made it around the entire golfing world. And the consequence that actually mattered, more than the embarrassment, more than the headlines, was simpler than all of that. He had to resign from the club. Not because anyone forced a vote, not because there was some formal tribunal. From what's been reported, it was the natural conclusion of what happens when you take something as small and as sacred as a member tournament, and you poison it from the inside. You can apologize, you can explain yourself on the radio, you can even be genuinely remorseful, and by most accounts he was. But you can't undo the moment your friends found out the celebration they gave you wasn't real. Part 8. What this is actually about. The step back from the golf course for a second, because I think if you only look at this as a story about a guy who cheated in an amateur tournament, you're going to miss what actually makes it worth talking about. This isn't really a story about golf. It's a story about what happens in the space between two people who trust each other completely, and one of them decides, just once, just for a moment, that the trust doesn't apply to him. Think about how small the actual lie was. One golf ball. One moment where nobody happened to be watching closely enough. That's it. That's the entire crime. There's no elaborate scheme here, no months of planning, no grand conspiracy. And maybe that's exactly why it hits the way it does. Because most betrayal isn't elaborate. Most of it isn't some criminal mastermind plot. Most of it is one small decision made in one small window of opportunity by somebody who had every reason not to make it. Somebody who was good enough that he didn't even need to cheat to be impressive. That's the part that stays with people, not the golf ball. The fact that he didn't have to. And I think about those guys on the green. The ones who clapped. The ones who believed him instantly, without a second of hesitation. Because why would they ever think to doubt him? That instinct, the one where you believe your friend without question, that's not a flaw. That's not naivety. That's just what it means to actually trust somebody. Which is exactly why it hurts so much when it gets used against you. Part 9. The Cost. Here's what Zach Holland actually lost in all of this. He didn't lose his golf swing. He's still, by every account, a genuinely talented player. He didn't lose his family. From what's been reported, he was on vacation with them when all of this became public, and there's no indication that fell apart. What he lost was smaller than that, and somehow bigger at the same time.
He lost the version of himself that his friends thought they knew. The guy who didn't need an asterisk next to his name. The guy whose word, on a golf course, in the woods, out of anyone's sight line, was automatically good enough. That's gone now. Maybe not forever. People do come back from things like this. But it's gone for now. And it's gone in a way that no confession, no radio interview, no amount of honesty after the fact can fully undo. Because trust doesn't really work like a bank account, where you can just make a withdrawal and then pay it back later with interest. It works more like a window. Once it's cracked, you can fix it. You can even make it look almost the same as before. But everybody who was standing there when it happened still remembers the sound. Now here's where I land on this. I don't think Zach Holland is some uniquely terrible person. I think he's a guy who, for 4 seconds, on one hole in front of people who loved him, made a choice he almost certainly wishes he could take back. And I think the reason this story traveled as far as it did, from a random Tuesday tournament at a private club in Missouri all the way out into headlines around the world, isn't really about golf etiquette. It's because almost everybody watching this has, at some point, been on one side of this story or the other. Either the person who trusted somebody completely and got burned for it, or, if we're being honest with ourselves, the person who had a small moment when nobody was really watching to do the wrong thing. Most of us never get caught. Most of us never end up on the radio explaining ourselves. But I think that's exactly why this story is worth sitting with for a minute. Not because Zach Holland is unusual. Because he isn't. That's the whole story.